The South African police in Gauteng say more than 400 suspects for various crimes, with about 380 of those being foreigners without permits, have been arrested during Operation Restore. This in parts of Joburg since Friday. The undocumented suspects were handed over to the immigration officials for further processing, and the surge in arrests comes on the back of the sporadic shutdown of foreign-owned stores by Operation Dudula members, whom residents believe prompted the police operation. We speak to author and policing expert Ziyanda Stuurman in regards to this. So good morning to you, Ziyanda. Do residents have a point here? Is this reactionary from the police?
I would say yes to both of those things. Good morning, Bushe. I think that we're essentially in a sort of pattern of action that again shows that the police are incredibly reactive to issues that happen on the ground. We saw this during the July unrest, for example, and in other waves of xenophobic violence before. We're essentially in a situation where the police are constantly being led by what's happening on the ground instead of either being able to anticipate what's happening or to at least in this case, respond more timeously. I think Operation Dudula has been around for a good couple of days at this point, and I think that pressure built up to essentially, force the police to look into many of the claims that those who are members of Operation Dudula have made, including in terms of immigration and some of the people who they're acting against being undocumented. That isn't to say, though, that's necessarily just the fault of the people who are, who have been caught up in this raid. I think that, and we'll likely get to this later, but I think that there's a major issue with the immigration law in this country and the immigration system, particularly through Home Affairs, that leaves a lot of people undocumented.
Yeah, absolutely. And so understanding that these, the people that have been arrested, the undocumented foreigners that have been arrested will now be handed over to authorities. I mean, what would that then look like for them? You mentioned that it's not always their fault, and here they're sitting in a very precarious situation.
Precisely. So the major issue is that there just aren't enough officers, Home Affairs officers across the country that are renewing whether they're asylum seekers permits, refugee permits, or permanent resident. That has been worsened and compounded really by the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's really slowed down many of the processing of these incredibly important documents, which also have to be processed timelessly. Otherwise, it leaves people in a legal limbo where they've applied for renewal, but that renewal hasn't come through yet. So basically what this looks like now is that, Home Affairs carries on the process and may order the deportation of some of these suspects. That then would take them through a sort of deportation station, and that process may then end up with them being deported back to their country of origin. But I think this really does show, again, this breakdown in the systems around immigration, but also in policing in this country, where a group like Dudula can put so much pressure on the police to act in a particular way.
And I mean, the difficult thing now as well is that operation, like Dudula that you mentioned, also makes these foreigners susceptible to violent crimes. And it seems, going by what you're saying, that it's a policy matter more than anything.
Precisely. So we really have this vicious cycle where essentially, those, again, who are aligned to Dudula make claims, and sometimes really outlandish claims about, work opportunities or jobs or employment being taken by people who are not necessarily South African or who weren't born in South Africa, and where they do then find some suspects who don't have proper papers and documents, as we were talking about earlier. That then feeds into the cycle, into the confirmation bias of essentially what's happening out there. The truth really is of the matter is that there are thousands of law-abiding foreign nationals who do have their papers in order and who do work every single day to keep their papers up to date. But they are also being failed by Home Affairs, by the police who don't protect them, and unfortunately in this scenario by some of their fellow citizens.
How important was it to have Home Affairs on the ground as well? And would that have helped some of those law-abiding foreign nationals, in your opinion?
I do. I think that, essentially, again, we need to remember that Home Affairs, is meant to be the main body that enforces immigration laws. Of course, the police have to act where they believe that the law isn't being followed. But I do think that it's important to have, again, Home Affairs inspectors or Home Affairs staff on hand who know, if somebody presents a paper, whether it's a temporary permit or papers to show that they have their application in process. I think that that's very helpful because that's not necessarily something the police are equipped to do or are equipped to process.
In terms of the South African police services and their resources, we know that it's been very tough to come by budget for the police services over the last couple of years. Could that be part of the reason why they're so reactive to what's happening in the country regarding foreign nationals?
So I think that that's actually a myth that needs to be dispelled. Basically, since 2012, the police budget has risen from about 55.6 billion rand a year to about 97 billion rand last year in 2021. So if we're talking about the police budget and what they're able to do with their resources, it isn't necessarily a fact that the budget hasn't kept up with their costs. I would argue that it has. What has happened is that there's been limited or more limited function within the police service relative to how much and how big their budget is every year. So this I think is really a case of we need to be asking more and we need to be a little bit more critical of what the police are spending their money on every year and every day. If in fact they're again in this case pleading that they're hamstrung from being able to sort of carry out the duties, and particularly I think the kind of community safety duties that Operation Dudula and others like it say that they require of the police.
And then in that case, then, let's talk about the foreigners who are illegally in the country and some who get into illegal practices. Why then would the police not take action a little bit earlier? There have been claims of corruption within the police services made that, they're being paid off and such. What do you make of that?
I think that all of those points definitely can be true at the same time. Like we know that our police service has a corruption issue. We know that, or at least it's definitely perceived to be that way. We also know that there have been, sort of multiple issues with police leadership, and they are not being, sort of timeous disciplining of police officers who do get involved with criminals or who are found to have links with criminal networks that may then be paying them off. So I'm not saying that the police at no point ever should enforce immigration laws, but I think precisely the point that you were making, that they're incredibly reactive and they constantly are either having to wait for situations to boil over, as they have now in this case, or they essentially are powerless or make themselves powerless to go after those ranks or those groups who may or may not have foreign nationals in them and who may or may not legally be in the country. I think that this should definitely be an area of priority for both the police and Home Affairs in their investigations.
Now, the concern is once these tensions boil over, people's lives become at risk here. And the xenophobic attacks that we've seen in the past are always something that's in the back of the minds of a lot of people, especially foreign nationals in the country. How do we get off that knife's edge that the country is currently tittering on? At least it seems like it is at the moment.
That's an excellent question, and I'm very sad to say that I don't think we've learned very much, even from the very first sort of large wave of xenophobic violence in 2008. I think that there's been very little done to address a lot of xenophobic sentiment amongst both South Africans and everyone really living in the country, and that takes the hard and difficult work of, again, trying to create economic opportunities and to grow the economy so that people don't feel like they're in such intense competition with each other for basic jobs or for their livelihoods. I think that involves a lot of social cohesion campaigns that either could be led by arts and culture or other important government departments. I think that we're in a really difficult space at the moment where we both have a shrinking economy and really tough economic times, and at the same time these sort of tensions. And then that's all compounded by dysfunction at Home Affairs. So I don't have a great answer for what needs to be done, but all three of those things need to be addressed all at once.
It's a very dangerous concoction, but let's leave it on that point. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Ziyanda Stuurman, she is an author and policing expert, joining us via video link regarding Operation Restore, which kicked off in the early hours of Friday morning. 3 a.m. is when that operation kicked off sporadically across parts of the city of Johannesburg.